So, welcome to the very first episode of RAILpeople. It's a brand new podcast from the people at RAILstuff. Shameless plug time, just to start things off. If you don't know who RAILstuff are, then check us out. We're at rail-stuff.com, and we are a retailer of model railway scenics and accessories. So, anything from line-side kits to weathering to foliage and trees, anything like that, you can come find it with us. But this podcast is designed to meet some of the people in the model railway world and to find out what their inspiration is and how they got into this fantastic hobby that we have. And I'm pleased to say that our very first guest is a familiar face on YouTube. Now, I hate to use the word influencer, but when somebody has a certain number of subscribers on YouTube, they can probably be described as some form of model railway influencer. And our first guest on this show has a decent number of subscribers already and continues to build the channel Emperor's Path. So please welcome SBJ, or Sam, to the show. Sam, hello, welcome, thank you for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
It's not a problem, and you were the first person who came to mind when I put this together. And we do hope to meet lots of different people from across the industry as the weeks and months go by. But great to have you with us for the first one. I think just to set the scene, the very first question is probably the most important one of the entire hour that we will spend together, and that is quite simply, what is your favourite cheese?
I'm a strong cheddar man, and for the past 10 years or so, I've been advocating that Snowdonia Black Bomber is the best cheese ever invented.
I'm going to write that one down.
I recommend. It's one of those things where sometimes it pops up in Tesco, sometimes it pops up in Christmas time, it pops up in Sainsbury's, but usually you can find it in Waitrose or really good butcher's shops, ironically. But Snowdonia Black Bomber.
Do you know what I'm going to pick some up? I don't know where from, but I'll find some. If not, I'm sure I can find some online. Yeah, don't ask why that's the first question. I just like cheese, and it's always interesting. It's one of those questions that everyone has an opinion on. Nobody goes, I don't know, not really into cheese.
I think it's interesting as well as a good question because it can dissipate any sort of unease that you may be having with someone who's doing an interview. And I didn't know that was a question coming up, and instantly you said cheese and I salivated, which already puts me in a great sort of mindset for the rest of this session. And then afterwards I'm going to go, I think my daughter's got some Dairy Triangles in the fridge, so I'll have to go and have those because I don't have any Black Bomber. But yes, it's a strong opening question.
Well, just to settle things a little bit further, I'm going to hit you with some quick fires now before we really get into talking about you and everything that you do. I've got, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 quick fire either or answers here for you, and you can add a little bit of flavour to the answer if you wish, or if you just want to give us the single word, then whichever you prefer. First one, very simple.
Yep.
DC or DCC?
DCC. When I first got back into the hobby, I was against it, and after building the layout in the loft, I've slowly converted over to it, and I'm converted. I think it is good, and it's way more affordable than it was when I first got into the hobby about 15 years ago.
We will talk about that a little bit later on, I'm sure. Steam or diesel?
Diesel.
Diesel or electric?
I'm gonna say electric.
Ooh.
Simply because we don't see a lot. If it was going on nostalgia, it would probably be electric, because in Portsmouth we really only have sort of electric multiple units. But if I was going out to buy something, diesel.
Okay. But your first reaction was electric, so interesting.
It was, yeah.
Airbrush or brush? I think I know the answer to this one.
Airbrush. I am very, very lazy.
Oh, is it lazy or is it just... I don't know. We'll get onto that as well. Yeah. Specifically around locos here rather than buildings, weathered or pristine?
Weathered.
Okay.
I am a big fan of dirt, grime, dust, and all that sort of thing.
Perfect. And the final one, if we're talking about kits that you might build, are we going for plastic or wood?
I think plastic. I can't say I've built many. Can we put MDF into the wood?
Yeah, I left wood fairly open because I was thinking sort of laser cut kits because they're growing so quickly in popularity. But yeah, MDF as well. Yeah.
I think for value, I always find that MDF kits are way better value. In terms of what I can only describe as the tobacco residue that you get on your hands after dealing with laser cut kits, I think the plastic sort of pins it just that little bit more. But I'm easy to either. If the kit looks good, it looks good in my eyes.
Yeah, but if you open a fresh pack of laser cut wood and just take a good sniff inside, that sort of burnt wood smell is just delightful. Anyway, I'm sort of more leaning back towards the kind of cheese conversation here. Look, let's talk about model railways a little bit. I mean, that is what we're here to do. Tell us a little bit about your layout and how it came about and what it's based on. Just give us a bit of a brief overview of your layout as it stands today.
Sure. So I was previously really big into the wargaming, Warhammer sort of scene prior to COVID. And during COVID, I lost a lot of my love for it, but I still enjoy doing hobbies. And I've always loved trains. It's just a simple thing of I've never had the space to have a layout. And during COVID, I sat down with my wife and I sort of said, look, I built some small layouts just for fun in the past, sort of like shunting puzzles, and I said, look, I really would like to build a little layout in the loft. And yep, okay, brilliant, cool, let's do that then. And it grew arms and legs, and out of nowhere, rather than me just having 2 loops in the loft, it ended up being I think technically it's a 12-foot by 10-foot layout in the loft, with a massive gap in the middle for me to get up in the loft. And I love it. I don't love it right now because it's too hot. For those listening in the future, we are currently in the hot part of the British summer.
Hot part of the British records, to be fair. I mean, yesterday was, up in the 40s for the first time ever. If you are listening to this in the future, so and for anyone who listens to this outside of the UK, yes, I know that's normal everywhere else, but we're British and we're not used to it, and our houses are designed to keep heat in, not let them out. So it's been pretty brutal, isn't it, for the model railway fans?
Yeah, I think the thing is as well is we have this thing in Britain where we have a very, very small window of where we get our really hot summers, and it would never justify us needing to buy an air conditioning unit to keep us cool. And I think that's the biggest problem we have as British people, English people, United Kingdomites, or whatever you want to call us, is that our time period is so small. But anyway, that's not trains.
No.
And yet, so I've always grown up with seeing lots of Great Western style layouts being seen in the magazines, a lot of northern layouts being seen, things that are based on nowhere that I live. Me personally, I've always seen, I'm from Portsmouth for those who don't know me, and I've always seen the train line in Portsmouth as quite a big thing. I mean, in my naivety, that's not the case anymore, but I was perplexed as to why I hadn't seen anyone doing a layout based on the Portsmouth area, because it's quite a nice, it's a line that basically comes onto the island, and then it's just a terminus, then a terminus, then a terminus. So it has the modelling potential that you can have, depending on where you're modelling, you can have one giant terminus at the end of the island, which is on a pier, or you have the the Portsmouth Central Railway, which has the through line that goes through, or you can have terminuses on there, or you've got the Fratton Yards, which have massive potential for modelling. And I was just always sort of like, I really want to see it, and in the end I was like, well, I'm going to do it. So I went on Google Maps and basically tried to work out a rough plan of what I wanted. I used a lot of artistic licensing in the sense that technically the curve is facing the wrong way, but so that I got more out of the layout, I made it so that the curve was going the opposite direction, things like that. I had a couple of local people who were like, "Oh, you do know that the yard's not like this?" I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm I'm doing this for me sort of thing." And basically it's moved away a little bit from being an exact replica of Fratton, which is my local station, but it has the sort of the bones of it, and I've developed it to make it more fun for me as a train enthusiast or a model railway person.
And there's something that is, so I'm assuming because it's in the loft, this is a permanent loft fixture. It's not something you would plan to ever take out to an exhibition, or is it? No. So therefore, it is for you, isn't it? It's not for other people. So, you know, I know there's a lot of people who will always think that prototypical is best, and you know we can always strive for that as much as possible. But you're right, you know, sometimes a model railway is for you and what you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
So what about era? Where does it sit era wise?
So era wise, I always say it's between 1985 to 1995, which is a broad spectrum of time in the model railway world, I'm aware. But it's basically so that I can run a lot of very different things. I took a lot of inspiration from Everard Junction, who runs almost the same sort of era as me, in the sense that it allows me to have a lot of the BR blue and grey stuff, whilst also that transitioning period of going through all of the sort of the jazzing up of colour, I think is the way he said it, or it becomes a more colourful thing. And I've sort of extended it on the other side of it more than he did, so that I can hopefully, when it comes out, incorporate a lot of the very beginnings of the Southwest train stuff that runs in my area. I was born in '88, and I remember that sort of period, but I also wanted to be able to I like the BR Blue era, but I also like the colourful stuff, so it was more of allows me to incorporate lots of different things from various time periods.
And for me, the biggest thing that jumped out at me when I saw some of your videos on your layouts was probably the slightly more colourful stuff of the Network Southeast. And for me, I until I was 18, I grew up in Essex, and Network Southeast was what I travelled on if we went into London, or if we went anywhere by train. It was Network Southeast, and there's just something about that livery that is just so striking and gets me.
I always call it the Colgate, the Aquafresh Express, because it's the blue, the white, and the red. And yeah, it is a livery that I find is very, very strong. The regional railways livery has that same sort of effect, but where it's the blue, the grey, and the browny cream, it doesn't have the strikingness of that little red bit. And one thing that I do really like is that when Southwest Trains took over, especially in my area, took over the Network Southeast area, they very much stuck to the Network Southeast livery, but they just added in an orange stripe, which sort of signified the stagecoach branding taking over kind of thing. So you still got that livery even into the middle of the 2000s. You still got to see that livery to a certain degree, and I think it just reeks of my childhood, that particular livery, and it's why it's such a dominant force on my layout. And I'm sure there's people who do that, like they make sure that the livery that they remember the most is on their layout. Apologies, I interrupted.
No, absolutely. I suppose I was going to ask, you know, where your interest of trains comes from, and I guess some of it comes from your childhood and seeing trains around and looking at the local light. But was there some other kind of influence that really got you into it?
I think, like a lot of people who grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, Thomas the Tank Engine was a massive influence on my life. Like, whether or not you are one of the people who thinks that it's the worst thing in the world because it's not authentic, or whether it got me into trains. And up until sort of I'd say recently, I've always been a bigger steam fan than a diesel fan.
Yeah.
But I'd hit that, I feel like recently I'd hit that sort of point where it becomes not necessarily about Thomas, but it becomes about nostalgia. And I don't remember steam being around. So whilst I like steam trains, it very much became this is what I remember from my childhood sort of thing. But yeah, Thomas was massive, and it was very much a case of you'd struggle to go somewhere in Portsmouth without crossing over the bridge of the train line or not see it sort of moving around here, there and everywhere. Like it is a very prominent thing on the island because we are an island, and it's such a small area that you can't not see the trains. And I think that's such a big thing, because I know people who live nowhere near a train line and they don't get to see trains regularly, but they're massive enthusiasts and they have to travel hours before they can go somewhere that's even reasonably good. Like, yeah, and that was a big influence for me, to answer your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I suppose a lot of people don't even realise that Portsmouth sits on an island. It's one of those things that people don't think of, really.
No, and I think once again it has that amazing modelling potential. So because I live in Portsmouth, we have a great little beach, and I paddleboard. And one of the most amazing things I've done, that I don't know many people who could say this, but I was able to go train spotting on my paddleboard. Because there's this sort of rickety old iron bridge, which modelling potential would be fantastic to do it. That basically it goes, so we have the M27 motorway that is right on the edge. It is just off the island, and the trains pass through underneath the M27 motorway. They go across this rickety old bridge onto the island, but as it goes onto the island, it also goes through an old Napoleonic fort. So the scope of what you can see in this one space of like the moat that effectively surrounds Portsmouth Island, or Portsea Island, is beautiful. And I've done it before where I've gone, like my friends who I paddleboard with aren't train enthusiasts, but they know full well that as soon as we get to that sort of area, we slow down, we take it easy. And sometimes you see sort of 8 or 9 different trains going across it, and it's just such a fantastic thing because you can effectively paddle underneath the bridge, and just the sounds that you can hear from it are fantastic. And it's at the point where the tide's in fully, you have to crawl, like we have to go on your belly on the board to get underneath the bridge, kind of thing. So the island side of it is very fantastic.
You're making me want to go and do lots of Google images and things like that afterwards, because in terms of a modelling potential, you're right, it sounds absolutely fantastic with the bridge and the fort and the way it all comes together. The fact it's an island. For you, is it more about trains, or is it more about the scenics that goes around it, or is it the whole thing stitched together? What sort of really gets, if you want to go and do a bit of modelling, what is it that really gets your, for want of a better term, juices flowing?
I think definitely it is the running of the trains. For those who don't know who I am and haven't seen my layout, it very much is in essence, the major part of it is a 2-lane track with sidings that come off and go into platforms and stuff like that goes round and round and round. There's a terminating shuttle and stuff like that in there. And for me, having trains going round and round, the shuttle going in and out and in and out, is something that when I'm there watching it all, I'm like, that's when I really get into my groove of I want to do this, I want to do that. And it's why I've struggled to get the sort of the mojo of doing any hobby at the moment, because I'm not in the loft. And when I'm up there, sometimes I can lose hours because I just start going, I start cutting away and working out, right, this is where this needs to go. And then next thing I know, I've done 4 hours in the loft, and I don't know where the time's gone. And it's fantastic.
So it sounds like the inspiration you get for the next step of your layout comes from actually sitting there running trains, and then you start thinking and picturing it in your mind's eye. Am I getting that right from what you've just said?
Yeah, I might have a sort of, so I could sit here now and go, right, okay, I know that this needs doing, but until I'm up there and seeing it run around, I go, that section needs a bit of work on it, or I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that. And yeah, it is very much a case of, if the trains aren't running, I don't do as much and I don't have as much mojo to actually do things up there. And I'm one of these people who, this is probably frowned upon by some people, who I will happily airbrush and weather certain sections of my layout whilst the trains are running, and it can be quite scary at times, but if those trains aren't running, I'm not having fun.
Any mishaps on that front yet?
I don't think so, but I think we're okay at the moment. I mean, the coaches are heavily weathered anyway, and so oh, you've got me nervous now. I might have to check all my stock and stuff. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's been okay. I'm a big fan of the airbrush, as previously said, and I think to really make a mishap out of it, you'd have to be really careless to cause such disastrous effects.
Yeah, I'm sure I could manage it somehow, but never mind. So, what kind of stage is your layout at the moment? I mean, there is no. Let's just clarify: there is no such thing as a finished layout. I've heard people at a couple of shows recently say, "Oh, I finished my layout," and I just said, "No, you haven't. There's no such thing." But what kind of stage is your layout at?
Functional? Is that? I feel like it is at a point where. I talk about Everard Junction because it's a lot of the inspiration for me. There are other YouTubers out there who I love their stuff, but it's the sort of stuff that really gives me, when one of his videos come out, that's when I go, cool, I'm getting a lot of inspiration and stuff like that. And recently especially, he's been pulling up track that's been laid for years and stuff to try and make his layout better. And I genuinely sit there and I go, oh, but you need to work on this section. And then I sit there and I go, oh yeah, I need to pull this track up. So at the time of this, he's just done one about his fiddle yard. No scenic side of it whatsoever. But as soon as he did it, I was like, oh no, I need to get my fiddle yard sorted. And that definitely influences me a lot. But I'd say it's functional to the point of I can run trains in it, which is the most important thing to me. And I definitely say that there are scenic aspects that have been completed around the layout, but in no way, shape or form is it near anywhere that would resemble completion. Or I'd look at it in the sense of, would it go in a magazine? Because obviously that's one of the dreams, is being in I'm not going to name any particular magazines because it feels like I'm being really mean, but to appear in a model railway magazine is like a dream. Although I'm not doing it for anyone other than myself, at least for the true joy of it. Being in a magazine's like, yeah, I've made it. Or this is good enough that they want to show other people, I think and it's nowhere near the level of being able to appear in a magazine. So I feel like that is the best scale I can give.
So is that the aim then, you would say? If you had to say what is the aim of the layout, would be it would be great to have it in a magazine, or is that a little bit too black and white?
No, I feel like that's a fantastic representation, because you look at in all the various magazines, and there's some layouts where they say this isn't done. One of my favourite layouts is NSE Latchmere, and once again, I saw the article in a magazine about NSE Latchmere, and he even said, like, this is nowhere near done. Like, the station's not finished. That's a massive section of his layout that's nowhere near completion, but he's still got it in the magazine, and that was quite a nice thing for me to see, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to get this 100% completed before it gets in there. And to see someone with such a fantastic layout sit there and say this isn't done, and I don't know if because he mentioned it they decided to show pictures of where it currently sits, but yeah, it gives you a little bit of hope that you don't necessarily have to spend the next 10 years making it.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but also that connection that there is through social media, you know, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, whatever people choose to use to show off their layouts. You know, that when you've been following a layout on Instagram, for example, for a long time, and all of a sudden they say, oh, it's going to be in this magazine this month, you kind of get that, oh, I know that layout because I've seen, and it gives you that inspiration to think, well, hang on a minute, if they can, then maybe I can as well. And so I mean, in terms of social media, what do you think the kind of influence of that has been on the hobby, and not YouTube? We'll get onto YouTube in a minute, but the rest of social media, what kind of influence do you think it has on the hobby?
I'm going to say something really controversial, and there's probably going to be a lot of people who really disagree with what I'm about to say. I think that Instagram is the best platform for what I and what other people do in terms of hobby. It allows you to show work in progress pictures. It allows you to share videos. It allows you to share pictures. It allows you to, via the medium of stories, ask questions that people answer, and you can see who's connecting with you.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like it is a vastly superior platform in the sense of it is way more positive than Facebook.
Yes. Less toxic.
Yeah. So which is odd, because I feel with Instagram you can easily hide behind a persona on Instagram way more than you can on Facebook. When I first really got into the hobby and was really sort of knuckling down with doing the loft, I was like, I'm going to join a few groups and share my progress and stuff like that. And the stark contrast between Instagram, and it's not a case of like me, love me and stuff like that. It's, I have no problem with constructive criticism. It is the toxic criticism where somebody criticizes what you are doing, but when you try to sort of go, oh, well, this is why I've done this or something like that, suddenly you're a snowflake. And so first of all, I won't mention groups, and this is what killed Facebook for me in terms of this hobby. I was in a group where I posted a work in progress picture of some of my weathering, and I'd put oil paints on there. If I use oil paints and I make things very dirty and grimy, let it dry off, and then I use spirits to sort of work away at the grime and clean it back up. And somebody clearly hadn't read what I'd put with the picture. They just started giving aggro on the post. Now, somebody else, not me, somebody else said, it clearly says at the top, this is work in progress. The criticism you're giving isn't constructive. That person, once again not reading what was going on, started to attack the person who was trying to be supportive and basically said, you're a snowflake, and it just started treating them as if it was their post and stuff like that. And I was like, this is horrible. By the time I'd come back to the conversation, it was sort of 40 comments long with 3 guys, sorry, that's very bad of me, 3 people just sort of piling on this poor person who had nothing to do with the picture I'd posted. And in the end, I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. And I find that Instagram is far more supportive. The criticism is constructive, and I just find it works better for what we do.
Do you think part of the reason is because on Instagram people choose to follow you rather than on Facebook putting posts into public groups, for example? Do you think there's a difference there?
That's a fantastic way to look at it. I guess people join groups not necessarily to see the gumph that you're sharing, if that makes sense. And that hits the nail on the head quite. Yeah, you're choosing to see someone's work on Instagram to a certain degree. Unfortunately, if anybody follows the hashtag Hornby on Instagram, you unfortunately get some strays that are definitely nothing to do with model trains coming through.
A stray bee, for example, yes.
Yeah, the bee might be in the wrong place, or
okay. Yeah,
it's like on my personal account, I love food, I love cooking and stuff like that, and I follow food, and there's some people who have tagged the hashtag food in a post that definitely has nothing to do with food in any way, shape or form. And I think that is one of my problems with Instagram. But yes, obviously with Instagram, you choose to follow something if you wish to, and you have that ability to go, to even turn around and say, this no longer provides me what I was after originally, I'm going to unfollow it. And that is one of the beautiful things that you can do with it.
So alongside my note that says Snowdonia Black Bomber, I'm also writing down review use of hashtag Hornby.
Yeah. I'd love to see if there's somebody out there who is having the same problem as I am with the use of hashtags, and I've had to be far more selective in the hashtags. There's also, I didn't know this until I started following the hashtag, there is a place called Hornby Island. I believe it's in somewhere in America, and you get some stunning photos of the island.
Oh, great.
Like,
I mean, it's not useful, but great.
It's one of the nice ones that does sort of go through the cracks, but in a good way.
So let's just move on to talking about YouTube then, seeing as we've kind of nudged into that world a little bit. I mean, the obvious first question is Emperor's Path. What is that? Linking back to the sort of wargaming side of things, or is there another story behind Emperor's Path?
No, it is very much a case of I used to run a Warhammer-based channel, or it is still the same channel, and I had years ago I'd built up a following on there, and it was sort of one of these things where I lost. I was basically in a car accident, and it killed my mojo for the hobby. I didn't have the oomph to go and sort of record videos anymore, so kept the channel around, and then when I started doing the model railway stuff, I basically said to myself, I don't want to necessarily start from scratch, because I know that there's a lot of people who will have been watching it from the Warhammer days who will appreciate not necessarily the fact that it's trains, but some of the scenery making or the weathering and things like that. And I made a promise to myself that whereas before I was trying to become an influencer, that was very much a case of I want to become a Warhammer influencer who is famous to a certain degree. I wanted to make it so that I could eventually make that a career.
Yes, yeah.
When I restarted it, basically just started uploading to the same channel, I made a video that basically said, look, this is what I'm doing. If you want to leave, that's fine. If you want to stick around, that's great. Anybody who's new, even better. But I made the promise to myself that this Emperor's Path 2.0 was about me enjoying it and me following the journey so that I could look back at it if I wanted to. And if anybody joined me for the ride, that was great. And the support has been fantastic in that sense, that it was a case of people stuck around because they wanted to stick around, not necessarily because I wasn't doing wargaming or anything like that anymore. And that's basically all it is I didn't want to restart. I wanted to use the same platform that I'd always had. It was I guess to a certain extent, a brand name. And all it was that back in the day, back in 2015, when I created the channel, that was an easy reference that nobody else had taken, that was able to go, cool, Emperor of Mankind from Warhammer, I get that. It's a pathway to something or other. There's no real link to anything without sort of causing massive problems, and it was just easy to have EP as a logo and things like that. And then with the train stuff, it just transitioned that actually calling my station Emperor's Pathway was a nice link between the two, to have a station name called Emperor's Pathway to go back to the old Emperor's Path sort of thing.
So you've managed to link it all into what was already there, which is fantastic. I mean, what really started to grow the channel? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but you're at 1,500 subscribers there or thereabouts.
Yeah, 1,500, which is where it currently sits. And
what sort of got it growing? Was there any particular thing that just suddenly made it click and start to ramp up? Not that I'm tapping you up for ideas here, but
no, I think it was the biggest boom I had was nothing special in terms of sort of like suddenly became famous overnight type thing, but it was the best performance I've had from a video was I just did a layout update, and I'd spent a little bit of time trying to make it that the thumbnail was nice, the title was nice, and things like that, because whilst I'm doing it for my own personal sort of thing. I didn't want it to become sloppy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to perform nicely. It was a layout update where everything just seemed to click into place, and it sort of boomed from there. I also did sort of a very small series on like beginner sort of weathering stuff that covered both the Warhammer aspect and the train aspect, so it sort of crossed a few different streams, and a few friends sort of shared about it and sort of helped support me in that sense.
How much crossover do you think there is between those two hobbies, wargaming and model railways? Because obviously having the kind of business that I do, I actually tend to sell quite a lot of stuff to wargamers, especially on the weathering side of things and scenics as well. How much crossover really is there?
Way more than I thought there would be. I get quite a lot of sort of friends who don't want to do a model railway, but they play Warhammer and they love seeing it, but they necessarily don't either. Because the biggest problem for model railways is the space, because you can buy starter sets very cheaply, but getting the space to have a decent layout is the biggest problem. Whereas storing an army in a couple of cases underneath your bed is very easy to do. And there's definitely a lot of interest in what you do with model railways for sure, and the weathering side of it. All of the stuff that I do weathering my trains isn't necessarily the same weathering that somebody who's been doing it for years does, but it's the same weathering that I did on army models, tanks and stuff like that, and that transcribes so easily. Plus with scenics and things like that, you don't necessarily build massive amounts of scenic bits in wargaming, but people pay a lot of attention to the bases that their models come on, and that's definitely where you get a lot of sort of scenic implements that you can use to make your things better. And I think that definitely comes across as a crossover part.
So what about the kind of materials that you work with, whether it's creating scenics or weathering or painting? What are the kinds of things that you really enjoy working with? I know you've mentioned the airbrush a couple of times, but what do you really enjoy working with?
I mean, the airbrush is pretty much my go-to for everything, because I can use it on pretty much any project that I'm going to do. I find that there's this sort of stigma around airbrushing where you have to have this super expensive setup to be able to do anything well. Yet some of the best airbrushing work that me personally I think I've done has been done with like a £20 airbrush. Like, you don't need to have the most expensive setup to do everything, and it is very much a jack of all trades kind of thing. You can use it to weather a train, you can use it to weather scenics, you can use it to weather an army, you can use it, and the aspect that it is one of the few things I know that I can use outside of the loft makes it a very appealing thing as well, because I can take it up there to airbrush the layout, but when it comes to airbrushing locos or train or rolling stock or various bits, it just, the fact that I can sit at my desk and do it is a fantastic little piece of kit. And without going too far behind the curtain, it is a great tool to use when you're stuck on conference calls that are just far too long, that you have absolutely no input in.
Thankfully, I'm out of that world these days, and I get to control my own life a little bit more rather than being controlled by conference calls. But I know exactly what you mean. I may have built some kits in the past whilst on calls. What's wrong with your camera, Adam? Oh, I don't know. It's just stopped working today. One of those kind of things. So you love your airbrush. You work with it a lot. If somebody was brand new to getting into painting and weathering and things like that, and thought, I like the idea of using an airbrush, what advice would you give somebody who wanted to get started in airbrushing?
I think the biggest bit of advice that I can use is that you can't As long as you're using the right products, you can't ruin things.
Okay.
And I feel that is especially important with the model railway side of it. So with Warhammer and miniature wargaming and stuff like that, you basically start from scratch and you are painting the livery that's going on something. So that can be a very scary process. And then to weather it with an airbrush later down the line as well, that becomes a scary process. I would recommend to anyone who wanted to get into it that you get yourself an airbrush setup. My first ever airbrush setup was an £80 set from Amazon, and as I said, I've painted some of my favourite things using that particular setup. In fact, the compressor that I use is exactly the same. I just had to replace it after a while because it got used so much and it just sort of wore itself out. The joy with doing it with trains, and sorry I'm waffling on a little bit, is that
no, that's what we want. That's what we want.
Oh, that's okay then. The joy with the train side of it is that the things you're buying are typically pre-painted. They have already been varnished. They are already protected. If you are using acrylic paints, the ability to remove that paint for up to a day is ridiculous. You do not need a host of stripping materials or anything like that with acrylics. And it is why, so on the side I do commission work, and when I do the commission work, one of the first things I say to people is that I will not be varnishing the products that they want. And the reason for that is that if you decide later down the line that you do not want this weathering, or you want to remove it, or you don't like it and I have to start again, is a lot easier. Because acrylics, they are very forgiving. And if you were to pick up, so I've done airbrushing on you bought it brand new now, it'd be a £300 Bachmann Class 47. But I've done weathering. I didn't pay that, let's be really honest here. But I've done weathering on these, and it's a scary prospect. But because you're using acrylic paints, if you don't like it instantly, you can just get a cotton bud with water, something as simple as water, to get a lot of it off. And that is what is one of my favourite things about airbrushing and model railways, is that if you're using, and that's the thing I kind of feel like you have to stress here, is if you're using acrylics, it works. And I know that there's this sort of the argument of enamels versus acrylics and things like that. And you can obviously
tell us a little bit about that and where you fall down on that, because I get asked this a lot as a retailer. I don't really sell any enamel paints or anything like that. Pretty much everything that we sell in terms of weathering is either acrylics or oil based in terms of a wash. But in terms of a weathering paint, it's all acrylic based. Some people are still very stuck in the enamel way. I mean, where do you come down on that? And just explain a little bit.
I have been airbrushing for, I think it's about 6 years now, and I have never once used an enamel paint. The reason I've not used an enamel paint is simply because I was told when I first started that you need an airbrush booth to be able to use enamel paints, which is technically pretty spot on. The cleaning process with enamel paints is far more difficult, and I'll say the chemicals, but that's not necessarily what I mean. They are a little bit harsher on your lungs.
Yeah.
I'm saying this with a smile on my face to you, for people at home. I have airbrushed plenty of times with acrylic paints with only a window open and no mask or stuff. I will admit I now use a mask, which is very important because my lungs are screwed. But it is very simple to do so with acrylic paints, and I find, as I said, they are very forgiving. I've never used an enamel paint, and I have friends who use only enamel paints, and it is very much a what is your poison kind of thing, without trying to sound too grim. But yeah, it is. I just find them so forgiving that you can, I feel like by saying you cannot mess up with an acrylic paint is a little bit misleading, but you cannot mess up as long as you fix it there and then.
Yes, yeah. You cannot mess up in a way that's irreversible.
Yes, they are very, very easy to strip back, restart what you're going to do, and that makes them far more tempting, or easy, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Plus, acrylic paints are so easy to mix, clean. I think that's another thing, is cleaning your airbrush and stuff like that comes down to acrylics just make everything much easier. The final line is, you will get a better finish with an enamel paint. You will get a much more hard-wearing, durable finish with an enamel paint. You can get those finishes with acrylic. It just takes a little bit more. It takes a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more paint. It takes a little bit more patience to do. So, for example, if you were to put through the airbrush at the same time, an acrylic and an enamel through two different airbrushes, you will tend to get a better finish quicker with the enamel. But with the acrylic, as long as you're patient, you will get what I consider a better finish that if something goes wrong, you can adjust.
But does that also mean, therefore, if you look at it the other way around, that an acrylic allows you to be a little bit more subtle and build up layers in a different way than you do with enamel, or is that unfair on enamels? Like, enamels have got feelings. I don't know why I'm saying it like that, but you know what I mean.
And that enamels have feelings too. That is very much.
Okay,
that needs to be your next T-shirt. Is enamels have feelings too? I'd say yeah. I mean, I'm saying all of this as someone who's just admitted that he's never used an enamel paint.
True, yeah.
But visually, from what I have seen in the past, and through my own use of using acrylic paints, I feel that. Okay, so here's a great example. I have bought several secondhand locos, and you can tell which ones have been weathered with enamel paint versus which ones have been weathered with acrylic paints, because the enamel paint is so much harder to get off when you are stripping and going back to basics sort of thing. But also, and I guess this is more as a visual for yourself rather than for anything else, I stripped this, sorry for anyone at home, I stripped a class 37 where the actual paint that was painted in the warehouse came off easier than the enamel paints that had been used to weather the bogies and stuff like that. And I find that the transitions are better with acrylic in that sense, because you're not getting just brown. Because that is one thing that I see a lot when I pick up these secondhand bits, is that when something is weathered with acrylics, you get nice transitions, I find.
Yeah.
With enamels, it seems that you get great coverage, but that great coverage pretty much covers everything. And that's why you get these secondhand locos where all the bogies and the frames and stuff like that are brown rather than splattered with dirt and things like that. And that comes down to painting as well. But in terms of the paint used, I mean, I pick acrylic.
When you're about to weather a loco, do you sort of go from what you picture in your mind as what it should look like, or is there a place where you get reference material from to work from? How does it work in terms of your process?
I definitely go on what looks good, not necessarily what looks realistic, in my personal opinion. I find that I tend to do things a little bit more grimy than they would be in the real world. But at the end of the day, I don't run prototypical trains. I don't have a real exact layout or anything like that. One of the things that not made me famous, one of the things that is recognized on Instagram especially, is I have a Network Southeast Class 37, which is a non-existent, doesn't exist in the real world, and it is very much a Marmite thing. For I have had some people being like, WTF, while some people being like, I wish this was a real thing. And that's obviously a great feeling, to have people saying that they want something that you have created to exist in the real world. But I find weathering, I always try and look at it in the what looks nice rather than what needs to be an exact science of what well.
It's, everyone's got their opinions on, should we say, fantasy liveries?
Yep.
But I mean, for the Matchy to release the APTs earlier on this year in fantasy liveries, I never thought I'd see that. And also, they sold really, really well despite the astronomical price. So there is a love out there for fantasy liveries as well, and I'm sort of just starting one myself, but I'm no expert painter, so we'll
I'm intrigued. Are you allowed to tell us what it is, or?
It's a class 20.
Okay.
And basically, I'm building a very small 6x1 shunting layout, which is based on a mail depot. And the idea is, so Royal Mail obviously scaled back the use of the railways quite some time ago, but this is based on, what if they hadn't? What if they'd carried on, sticking the mail through trains more than anything else? So the reason I went for that particular train is it's a little smaller for a 6x1 layout, and actually, because at one point I would love to take this out with me when I go to shows and things like that, it's actually going to be RAILstuff liveried.
Nice, I like that.
That's the idea anyway, we'll see how that goes. I haven't got very far with it so far. It's currently been stripped back and painted grey. That's it.
That is a fantastic start as far as starts can go. I am super excited now that I know. I'm super excited to see how you do that, because I'm making an assumption here that entire layout will be, bar the rolling stock, it'll all be stuff that you stock and sell.
Yes. There's a couple of items that are not, but that's because I love working with the Wills kits. The packets of sheet material. Love working with that stuff. Unfortunately, because I don't have a physical shop, Pico won't let me actually buy that stuff and sell it to customers. Fair enough. Okay. So I have to buy that elsewhere myself.
Right.
But for the most part, it'll be things that we sell, and also some techniques that I've developed or learnt along the way. So in particular, the ballast is really quite dark and grimy. I really wanted it to be. And I've been working with a few techniques to recolor ballast, so you're not just hamstrung by the packages of ballast that you can buy in the shop. You can actually play with it and adjust it yourself. And actually that kind of leads me nicely onto another thing I was going to ask you is, obviously you do a lot of airbrushing when it comes to weathering. Do you do much with pigments?
No, is the simple answer. I have one pot of Forge World, sort of, it's like a sandy weathering powder pigment, and I've used it once. I've not come across a situation where I've gone, this could be done with pigment rather than an airbrush.
Yes, yeah.
Which I don't know if that comes back to what I said earlier about me feeling like I'm lazy with using the airbrush, or whether it's a case of that I'm content in what I'm doing already. So I'll leave that for you. And
see, I love a pigment. I find them so versatile because you can turn them into a paste, you can dry brush them on. I've experimented recently with using some of the MIG ammo rubber brushes, which are really nice to work with, especially because they're a lot easier to clean afterwards. I'm a terror with cleaning brushes, which is why I probably need to get myself an airbrush at some point. But there we go. So what's the plan for Emperor's Path going forward? Is it just to carry on doing your own thing, making yourself happy with it and see where it goes, or have you got something in mind?
I think end goal is, as previously stated, I'd love to be in a magazine. Like, I feel like that would be a point where I can go, if I was to die the next day, I'd be happy that I was published in a magazine. Not because I died, but because my layout was something that they deemed was nice enough to go into a magazine
Yeah.
and be written about or wrote about. I never know the correct term.
I think you were right first time. Yeah.
Cool, that's fine then. There's going to be an English professor or somebody who actually knows good English to be able to correct me on that one.
Well, as long as they subscribe to the podcast as well as leaving a comment, then that's absolutely fine. Not a problem.
That's the main thing. That's what you're after. Yeah, I feel like getting published is certainly something that would, or I guess the YouTube equivalent of it would be another YouTuber wants to come and do a tour of your layout. I guess that's also the kind of like the video element of it. But I feel like in my heart of hearts, if I can get into a magazine for what I'm doing and people enjoy it, I feel like that would be my biggest end game. And then if something were to happen and I died the next day, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
In terms of like progress and progression, I'm really trying hard to not do what I used to do, where I burnt myself out years ago, and making sure I had a video every single week that went up at the exact same time. I'm trying to do it that when inspiration strikes me and I do a video, that I edit it at my own pace, I upload it, and I make sure that I am happy with it before it goes out, rather than creating something that I've almost forced to go to a complete schedule just simply so that I can say I have had a video come out every single week for the past 2 years. And as long as I can do that and people like what I do, I guess that's pretty much the thing that really matters to me.
It feels like that ethos is better for content as well, in terms of, you know, if it's content that's driven by your mojo, as you say, your inspiration, then that's going to be better, more engaging content anyway, isn't it?
I'd like to think so. It feels like that is definitely a natural thing for me. I know people who are able to have this strike of mojo and film X, Y, and Z that creates 4 videos that they can put out in 4 weeks, and then they are able to go, right, okay, well, I've got 4 weeks, but still in my mind that I've got 4 weeks before I need to do my next video still gives you a time limit that sometimes puts you under that pressure that you don't need.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned earlier Everard Junction, who, by the way, I'm a big fan of as well. Love his videos. Is there anyone else that is a regular watch on YouTube for you, that you can't miss? I mean, for me, there's one other. It's New Junction. Big fan of Richard's work as well, and it's fascinating to see him start from scratch at the moment as well. But what about you? Anyone else who sort of jumps out?
In terms of diesel era stuff, which is what gives me the most inspiration, not necessarily anyone that comes to mind. It's more of if a video comes out. There are some steam era bits that I really like and some weathering stuff. So one of my favourite channels at the moment is Western Signalman. And what got me into James's channel is he's been doing a 009 layout build, and I find him very funny to watch. His comedy is on my sort of level, so when he makes a joke or mocks himself, it's on the same sort of level where I go, haha, yeah, I like that. I find it very easy to watch, and I like how he narrates things, so much so that I'm terrible at watching like the model railway show videos, because more often than not what happens is they are, and this is my personal preference, this doesn't mean that the videos are bad. What happens with a lot of the model show videos is they are videos of the layouts, and that's it. There's no description of what they are and things like that. And I think when one of the first videos I remember watching of James's was he did a model show review, but he had narrated over it, and that sort of thing keeps me engaged, because I often watch YouTube whilst I'm working, so I'll have it on a screen in the background plodding away, and if it's a model show exhibition and it's just the sound of the show, I'm not engaged with it. I'm not listening to what they're doing or saying. I'm not learning anything about it. And I think that's a very good point, is that the narration of James's channel is I'd argue my favourite thing, as much as I really like Everard Junction, I feel like James Western Signalman, the narration and the effort that he puts into what he's doing is definitely probably my favourite thing, which sort of flows into one of my other favourites, which is Double O'Neill.
Yes. Yep.
So Tris does some fantastic work, and it makes me so mad as to how good he is at making and creating his own locos. I mean, he might kill me for this, but I think he's an engineer by trade, if I remember correctly. He's able to.
In fact, he works in the radio controlled car industry.
He does,
as an engineer. So yes, he knows what he's talking about.
And he is a font of knowledge for some of the stuff that you can pick up from him. He doesn't post much anymore, and this sort of goes more onto the content that he posts on Instagram as such, but I am also a big fan of Dib's shunting layout. I think more than anything, he was an extremely supportive member of the community when I first jumped into the model railway scene.
Yeah, 100% agree. There's a few people within Instagram who have been very, very supportive of what I'm trying to do. RAILstuff has been going for just over a year now. And it's hard, it's hard building something up from scratch. And there's some people out there that even if they don't shop with you because they don't need anything or they've got everything that they need at the minute, whatever, it's still just nice to get that bit of encouragement from certain people. And Dibs is on that list for me, as well as your good self and a few others. But yeah, there's that really nice element of community, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that sort of definitely translates massively onto Instagram. Last one as a sort of a YouTube, I'd go Bunter's Yard.
Another one on Instagram as well, who's super friendly and supportive as well. Yep.
So I was in hospital almost this time last year, and I binge watched I'd been watching sort of like the occasional video, and I binge watched all of his weathering tutorials whilst I was in hospital, and it was just great. Like, I was off my face on some fantastic painkillers and oxygen and stuff like that, but he is one of those people who I was able to binge watch all of his stuff, and I learnt so much that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
And once again translates over to Instagram. Another person who is so helpful and supportive, and also the occasional funny comment. I sometimes we end up having back and forths where we're not even talking about the trains or the weathering, we're just joking with each other, and I like little bits like that. I apologise to anyone who I chat to who I haven't mentioned their channel. Like, it doesn't mean I don't watch it, because I do try my hardest.
Well,
but they are.
You didn't mention RAILstuff, but fine.
I feel like RAILstuff goes without saying. I'm trying to back that. I feel like RAILstuff just goes without saying. I mean, nobody sitting at home can see us, but I wouldn't want you to have to go red on the camera, like through oh, stop it kind of thing. But yeah, RAILstuff's really good as well. Yeah. One of my favourite, like, this proves that I do watch. One of my favourite videos that you did was the one where you went to a show and you said about how there wasn't anyone there, and you went out of your way. Not there wasn't anyone there; it was very quiet, and you went out of your way to make sure that you recorded stuff from the show because you had a bit of time to go around. And you worked your butt off to make sure that video went up that night to try and encourage more people to come to the show. And I think that from a community point of view is outstanding, because I think if you do that shows that you are dedicated to what you're doing and the love of what you're doing. And I think in the video you even said, it's 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But that's personally one of my favourite videos that you've done.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And shows are they're a fantastic part of this hobby, and some traders are just fantastic at shows. They're involved, they're part of it. Some shows are even organised by traders who then, get other traders involved and things like that. And then there are some traders who, if it's not very busy, then they will just whinge and moan about it, and everything is somebody else's fault. And I think that day I just particularly thought, do you know what, these guys have put on a really good show, and it's a really good venue, and the layouts are phenomenal. More people need to see it, and you try what you can. So do you get out to many shows yourself?
The honest answer is no. The simple reason for that is that most shows that are local to me tend to be on a Saturday, and a Saturday is swimming day, so we tend to have most of our day taken up by swimming, which is swimming lessons for my daughter are very, very important to me. It was one of the things that, living by the sea, I wanted her to be confident and sure of water and not be scared of it. So it's a very big part of our life. So it's like that other part of my life where on a Saturday I don't really get to do much because it's just right smack in the middle of our day. I am, funnily enough, going out to, I don't know what the sort of the lead time between this, but I am actually going out to a show on Saturday with Dib. I'm meeting Dib for the first time in real life. We talk all the time, but we're going to the show down in Eastleigh in Southampton.
Oh, great.
So yeah, I go to one every year in Portsmouth, which I go to with my father-in-law. He is like my train person locally. That is when I started dating his daughter. It was one of our connecting points in that we both like trains.
Oh, how great that you had a connecting point. Phew. It's like, I'm lucky. Father-in-law, massive into motorsport. I'm good.
You always breathe this sort of sigh of relief type thing. And I walked in and bolted to the side of his desk. He had a replica GWR number plate. And I went, oh, that's from a Great Western engine. He was like, how do you know that?
Boom, job done.
And yeah, we always connect on anything sort of train related, because he had 3 daughters who were not into trains in any way, shape or form, and I came along, and now we can talk trains. So every year for the last 10 years we've gone to the show in Portsmouth, which is at Admiral Lord Nelson School. That's like our thing, or at least non-COVID years, sorry. But I do try to go to other shows. The problem is that I just don't physically have the time. Is the biggest thing. I wish I had more time than I actually do. Hands up, I'm really bad at it.
But life, I mean, we've all got it. So, I've got no idea what next year is going to be like for me, because we're expecting our first in January. So I'm sure life is going to change somewhat next year. And
I wish you all the best of luck, as my little tornado of both hate and love takes up a lot of my time. I'm also a primary carer as well. I am drop off, I am pick up, I am childcare if she's sick and things like that. So I wish you all the best, and once we have stopped recording, I will give you every ounce of advice, sorrow, joy that I can.
Well, it sounds good. I think we've probably just about come to the end of our hour anyway, so a fantastic place to finish. Look, thank you so much for being the first guest on this. I couldn't have wished for any more from our conversation. Really good stuff.
Thanks for inviting me.
Not a problem. And for anyone who doesn't already follow you or know where to get you, then do some plugging of where they can find you and how.
So if you would like to find me, I am most active on Instagram at emperors_path. You can catch me there for the occasional non-railway related thing. You can find railway related thing, hobby related things, various bits and bobs on there. YouTube is also where I post regular-ish videos. If you want a little bit of railway in your life in video form, then You can go on there. I'm not really active on Facebook. I am on Twitter, but I don't really do anything on there either.
Ditto.
So it's one of those things. I signed up to it and then never really. I get Pokemon updates come through. That's pretty much it. Oh, that's the other thing in my life. I am a very, very big Pokemon fan. So what happens is in November you will suddenly see me drop off from the Model Railway stuff for a couple of weeks because I will be playing the new game very, very long amounts of time.
Fantastic. There's no such thing as too many hobbies. So
no, there's not. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask you a question which I should have asked you.
Please, yeah.
Earlier, but I feel like it is something very important and dear to my heart, and as you've already discussed it with me, what is your favourite cheese?
Oh, I wasn't prepared for that. So the thing is, right, I love very strong cheeses, but I also like very, very mild cheeses. I'm going to give you a very, very weak sounding answer, but just because this is the cheese that I just love with a tasty biscuit or cracker to go with as well, and that is a good slice of creamy Edam. It's mild, but it's just got something about it that it's easy to work with. It's it's lovely. Love it.
This may be controversial, but I'm a big fan of the rind on Edam.
Ooh.
I really like that sort of bit where obviously it's a very reasonably soft cheese, and then there's obviously you get to the edge of it and it becomes a little bit hard. Not the wax.
Okay, right. You don't eat the red bit.
No. I'm not the weirdo. So I interviewed someone today and they just talked about how they like to eat wax. No, it's the bit that you take off.
Yes.
The wax, and it's just slightly hard, and there's something quite delightful about it. I would liken it to the cheese world's version of a pork scratching.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison, and I see where you're coming from. I am so hungry right now. But I'm definitely going to have to go and find some Snowdonia Black Bomber. That is for sure. But look,
don't accept anything that comes in a truckle that's black. That's not Black Bomber. It has to be Snowdonia Black Bomber. My mum, bless her heart, every Christmas goes, "I got you some Black Bomber." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, mum." And then she hands me this black truckle of something that's just in a black truckle. So truckle is the wax coating around cheese, for anyone who doesn't know, who's not a cheese aficionado.
Everyone should be.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not a cheese aficionado, then I tell you what, I mean, if you're up for it, I feel like we should have send us a DM of what your favourite cheese is to prove that you've listened to the show. I feel like that is a thing. But I once again, sorry, I'm detracting from all of this, but now that you've mentioned biscuits, what is the perfect biscuit to eat your cheese with?
Now, you see, I like a cheesy biscuit, but I also like quite a salty, thin, crisp biscuit as well. Okay. But if I'm having a spot of Edam, I do like to go classic and have a digestive. Yes. Yep.
I feel like that is the perfect answer. The I mean, it's not always Hovis, but yeah, the little, if you buy a box of crackers and it's the Hovis one that is basically a digestive, that is, I feel like that is the pinnacle of cheese crackerness.
I'm so hungry now. For context, it is 3:48 p.m. and it's sort of that halfway stage between lunch and dinner, and now all I want to do is eat cheese.
I don't know if you're like me, but obviously knowing that I was coming on recording, the last thing I wanted to do was sort of get like acid reflux or something like that. So I was so nervous about this that I skipped lunch.
Oh, Matt, you're definitely hungry then. So look, we'll let you go and have some food. But thanks once again for being with us. And yes, please DM us with your favourite cheese as well. You can either do it on at emperors_path on Instagram or at RAILstuff on Instagram as well. either of us will accept that, and I'm sure we'll share any responses that we get between us, and we can put out what people's favourite cheeses are. I'm so glad that you were a cheese aficionado when I asked that question, or else it could have fallen a little bit flat. But the whole podcast certainly hasn't. Thank you very much for being with us, and and for those of you who listened, thank you for doing so. However you get your podcasts, please feel free to hit that subscribe button as well. And of course, don't forget, if you need any model railway scenics and accessories, head over to rail-stuff.com, or if you're of that persuasion, rail-stuff.com. Depends on how you like it. Sam, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.